Good day, dear Geneticus, and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to have a look at common errors today, specifically looking at which words to choose and how to use them. I'm Mrs. Kruger. I hope you enjoy this lesson. Now let's talk about the slip of the tongue. Using a word that sounds similar to the intended word, but has a different meaning is one of the most common errors in word choice. Now, such an error is often just a slip of the tongue, especially if you're a home language speaker. But in writing, the marker depends on the learner's ability to choose words carefully, to say exactly what you mean. The marker must know exactly what you mean to ensure that the adequate mark is afforded to you. If word choice is inexact, the reader will easily form the wrong impression. Be sure you know the meaning of the words you use, and be sure that they are appropriate to the context, not too informal or slang, not pretentious or fancy. Sometimes word choice is a problem because the words are used incorrectly, and sometimes the word choice is merely just inappropriate. Now, throughout this slideshow, we're going to look at a few of the errors that are made very often. The first one, of course, is me, myself, and I. You may be tempted to use these words interchangeably because they all refer to the same thing. But in fact, each one has a specific role in a sentence. I is the subject pronoun, me is the object pronoun, and myself is a reflexive or intensive pronoun. Many people confuse the pronoun I and me. I, of course, is the subject pronoun, while me is an object pronoun. Me is a personal pronoun that refers to one's own self. Specifically, it's an objective pronoun. Me takes the function of an object in the sentence, right? So myself is also a pronoun that refers to the speaker, although it is a different kind of pronoun than me. So when you use this, try to use the different variations here. Now, in the example there, you will notice that, for example, we say, for the example, me, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were talking to her, said the learner in the front of the row. Give me that phone. Right? And myself, I like to describe myself. So it has to refer back to the subject of that sentence. I care for who? Myself. So it has to go back to the actual word there. Right. Let's have a look at the next one. There's commonly repeated rules about fewer and less. It goes like this. Fewer is used to refer to number along things that are counted, as in fewer choices and fewer problems. Less is used to refer to quantity or amount among the things that are measured, as in less time and less effort. A definite rule covering all possibilities is maybe impossible here. If you are a native speaker, your best bet is to be guided by your own ear, choosing words that sound more natural in a particular context. If you're not a native speaker, the simple rule is a good place to start, but be sure to consider the exceptions as well. So when we use this, try and think about, is it an amount? Is it a total? And how do I use them? All right, let's look at among and between. Now, the most common use for among is when something is in or with a group of a few, several, or many things. The most common use for between is when it is in the middle of two things. So imagine it like this. Among can be in a class of people. There was a whisper among the classmates, right? So not particularly two groups of people or two things, but it could be many of them. It could be a few of them. However, when we look at between, think about it like this. It's something that's stuck between one thing or another. And then it becomes easy because then you can figure out that between is always between two things, two entities. Right? I hope that makes sense. Oh, compliment and compliment. Now, the complement with the I is a noun and it expresses praise. For example, when you compliment someone, you praise something about her, right? So we can use it as a verb or a noun. I like your neon rainbow unicorn t-shirt is a compliment with an I. The word compliment, spelled with the letter I, should remind you of the saying I like, how you begin your compliment. I like. So think about it, I like. And then that I will remind you to write a I with compliment. Complement with an E can also be a noun, and it is something that completes something else. When something complements the verb something else, it makes it whole, it adds a bit of value, and it completes it, right? We are not expressing our opinion on the matter. We are not giving praise. We are simply saying that that thing fits with this thing. If one thing complements another, the two things increase each other's good qualities when they are brought together. For example, nutmeg, parsley, and cider all complement the flavors of the beans, right? But even pizza, if you think of the different toppings, and you put on some basil and you put on some, oh, I like a bit of ham and a bit of mushrooms and a bit of garlic. They all complement each other and the flavors kind of infuse and they feed on each other. And that's a complement with an E. Obviously, we don't pronounce it like that, but just so you can imagine the difference. So, how do you remember it? I like compliment and complement. There are plenty complement things that suit each other. All right, I hope that helps. All right, now we very seldom see this. Premiere, and that's how you would pronounce it, is the first show of an event. The premiere, as other parts of speech, convey a similar meaning. In other words, it's the first thing. A premiere could describe a movie premiere, or the words premiere and movie both end with the letter E. That might help you to remember which one it is. Premier, used as an adjective, is to describe the best something. So premier means here premium, like really expensive, excellent. And neither of these words end on an E, right? It is less common, the second one, and the term describes a person who is first in their rank. For example, the premier may be the chief executive officer or the president of a company, but it means the main one, the chief guy, right? So remember it like that. Effect and effect. Now, this one has boggled many people, and the thing is, we love asking this one, especially when it comes to our homophones. The noun effect refers to the outcome of a result. If you associate special effects in a movie with the word effects, you'll remember that effect should be used as a noun to describe the outcome. An effect is something that happens or exists because something else has happened. The report shows the effect of noise on people in factories. Another example would be this has the effect of separating students from teachers. You can say that something has a particular effect on something else. Improvements, for example, in the water supply can have a dramatic effect after on health. So the way I remember it is that an E is after an A in the alphabet. So it is the after effect. Right. For example, these changes will have a significant effect on the business. Now, when we get to effect, the verb is obviously effect describes something that manipulates or causes change. To affect someone or something means to cause them to change, or often in a negative way sometimes. An emotional piece of news may affect how you feel after you hear it. These people are making decisions that will affect our lives, right? The disease affected Amber's lungs. Right, I hope that helps. Right, accept and accept. Sound the same again. The verbs except the first one with an A means to take in or receive. When using the word accept associated with the word acceptance, you take something in, you receive it. Accept with an EXC is not a verb. It can be used as a preposition or a conjunction or even an idiom. In each form, the word except means with the exclusion of, meaning to have left out. When you use the word except, you want to exclude something. So look at the root words there because they really help us to see exactly what they mean. Now the examples here are, I always accept compliments from students, and look at that compliment. All the boys except Paul, Paul is the one left out, started to giggle. Right, so easy peasy, lemon squeezy here, right? I love this one. And very often it's used wrong. So let's have a look at what it means. Assure means to remove all doubt, to give someone confidence and anything else that might need it. When you insure, it means to make certain or to guarantee. To remember when to use insure, note that the last two letters of the words guarantee are an E, and the word insure begins with an E and ends with an E. His reputation was enough to ensure that he was always welcome with an E. Insure is a verb that communicates protecting someone's assets against loss or harm. If you are discussing the protection of assets, think of car insurance and then use the word insure. Insurance, insure your baggage before you leave home. Right, and we love asking words like this. We try and trick you here with your comprehension or your language section, and we'll ask you to identify the single error that has been made. So have a careful look at these. We love asking them. Now, what a lovely example here, regard and regards. It's a very subtle difference. We use regard when you want to express consideration or referencing something specific. Writing in regards to is one of the kind of pet peeves that we will have. Regards is typically the proper word choice, unless you're sending your feelings of empathy to someone else, which brings us to the next word, regards. Regards are your best wishes or warm greetings. Many English speakers get confused about whether to use with regards to or with regard to. The correct phrase, of course, is with regard to, with the singular noun, regard. It means the same thing as regarding or in relation to. Even though adding the unnecessary S is a small error, it's important to get the phrase right. Making this grammatical error can make you look unprofessional, especially in the workplace one day. And also, because you are either a home language speaker or a first additional or second speaker, you want to master the language so that you can sound intelligent when using it. Now, here is exactly the same type of situation where we are left with an S and a word without an S. If you want to convey the meaning of next to or alongside or abreast, use beside. Associate the word maybe with something like alongside, beside, alongside. Both words end on side. Beside can also mean not connected to. You would write that is beside the point, not besides the point. The mountain peak was beside the river. So when do we use besides? Now the word besides means in addition to, extra, added. Besides ends with the letter S, which reminds us of a plural word, two or more of something. In other words, extra, addition. Besides can also mean other than or except. Associate the S sound in the word except with the word besides, which ends on the letter S. Right. Ah, yes, one of my favorites. Stationery is always a noun. So memorize it. Stationery is always a noun. It's typically decorative paper or ornate pens. You might use it to jot down quotes from your favorite writing books. Associate the noun stationery with paper. See, they're both with an E. The last three letters of the noun stationery contain the letters ER. The word paper also ends with the letters ER. Now stationary with A, just phonetically stationary, means still, grounded, motionally, definitely not moving. It can be used as a noun or an adjective. Since the noun stationary can also be used as an adjective, associate the A in the word with adjective. What is the first one again? Yes, it's a noun. This one is not. With the letter A in the last three letters, we can link it to adjective, stationary. And that way, it will be so much easier to remember. The car was stationary. I took out my stationery with an E to write my exam with. Right, now we get to whose and whose. Very often, ladies and gents, we find that learners mix these two words up, and they have actually a great difference. So, whose is a shortened word, it's a contraction of two words, and very often we forget that these two actually combined create the words who and is, or who has, or who was, depending on the tense that we are in. If you're combining a verb with the word who, it's appropriate to use whose, so who apostrophe s. And remember, you have to actually, when you're writing, sound out the words. So, who's coming for dinner? Who is coming for dinner? Now, if you remember that we never ever use apostrophes to create plural words, in actual fact, we never create apostrophes for anything else except possession or omission/contraction. If you learn those two spelling punctuation rules, then you will never go wrong when trying to figure out which is which. Now, whose? It's very easy. It's part of my parts of speech, and it's a possessive pronoun. It works the same way as in mine or yours or his or hers. And also remember that when that moves to the middle of a sentence, it becomes a relative pronoun. Whose jacket is this? And that will help you to remember. It's a longer word, it stands on its own, and it is not two separate words that are contracted. When you see that apostrophe, think immediately, ooh, it can either be possession of something or it can mean that those are two words. Right, got it. Let's go on. Sometime we forget. Sometimes we forget that we have to be careful where we use words. When someone is one word, it is an adverb that refers to one point in time. For example, I'd love some coffee with you sometime. Yes, it is not specific, but it still allows for a time period here. While sometime, two words, when they are separate two words, think of it like some as an amount, sometime, a little bit, a short amount. For example, I just ate so much food, it will take some time before I'm hungry again. So here, it's very important that we study our parts of speech. They will show us how to improve our writing. I always tell my kids it's like baking a cake. The ingredients don't change that much. You need something floury, you need some sort of wet ingredient, you need something that bind everything together, and a bit of flavor and a twist here or there. If you have the right type of ingredients, no matter if they're gluten-free or the best white flour you can get, it doesn't matter. The combination and how you put them together, that becomes your sentence. So if you know your ingredients, your parts of speech, you know how to wield them or use them or identify them, not only will your writing skills improve, but you will start to understand more about the language. Now, this is important, especially when answering questions. You need a wide vocabulary, and also when you want to comprehend certain passages, extract, poems, and so on. So the more that you build your vocabulary, the more that you learn the rules of the language, the easier and more effective the language will become. Now, the same thing applies here. Into is a preposition that means entering or transforming. For example, the fashion designer transformed the ugly fabric into a chic dress. A noun typically follows the word into. So something to remember on your part. Now, when we look at in and to, a verb that pairs with the word in typically goes before into. For example, during the netball match, the wind defense moved in to intercept the ball. Right, so try and see, is it a noun in front of my word or is it a verb? If it's a noun, one word. If it's a verb, two words. Right, that should be fairly easy to remember. Right, now let's look at academic writing. Now, very often, I don't know about you, but when I start writing, it's like my brain wants to use all the words in the universe, but I still don't feel like I can write. And when we are working on our pieces that have to be more formal, we have to be able to write a bit academically. Now, here are a few notable examples, and you'll see, for example, show beyond doubt. A different way to put it is proven. From my standpoint, argumentative essay. Personally, and don't say personally I think, that is tautology. We don't need that redundancy when writing. Just say personally, da 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 da. Right, in case of, during, on the assumption that if, do you see, by shortening this, we are able to sound more professional and more convincing at the end of the day. Always check the meaning of unfamiliar words before using them in manuscripts or, in this case, your essays. Do not use words that you cannot use or wield, that you have not been able to successfully spell. But saying that, I do want to encourage you that before every paper 3, have at least 5 to 10 big or fancy words that you have practiced, that you've used in your daily speech, that you've used in writing, and use those 10 words to boost the level of your language usage. Now, that being said, if you cannot successfully write a sentence, no amount of big words will ever boost your marks. You have to understand it. Otherwise, I am definitely not going to understand it as a marker. Right. Make sure you use accurate phrasing. For instance, instead of saying the plastic doctor, use the pale obstetrician. Right? Whenever possible, avoid repetition. Repetition becomes one of those annoying things that really drops your content mark, especially when you're doing your essays and transactionals. For instance, instead of saying new innovations, just use innovations. Right? You see the redundancy. Instead of saying revert back, simply write revert. And of course, we know that it's tautology. It's one of the areas that you must, as a senior learner, be able to identify. I'm always going to ask it in the final paper. As a teacher, I will definitely make a plan to put this somewhere in my paper this year. Right, so I've given you a few additional points to go look at. There are so many common errors that we make, but I've given you the ones that really stood out to me the past few years. Try to go through some of these websites, see if there's something else you can look at to increase your vocabulary. And with that, I greet you I hope you have a lovely day. I hope there's something that you could have taken from this and use. Remember, there's a whole lot of them, so go look them up if your teacher hasn't given them to you. And best of luck, Junior Techie.